What is up, guys? This is the Sound Alchemist, and today I'm back to talk to you about my own personal D&D universe entitled The Embers of Divinity. So if you don't know what this is, I understand, because it's been a while since I've talked about it, but there is a playlist which I will link at the end of this video, so you guys can know the ins and the outs of what exactly I'm talking about. But basically, I've created my own D&D universe with different worlds and whatnot, and I'm going to be talking about a certain character from one of these worlds. And that character is known as Gore the God Hunter. So if you're into the Marvel comics, the Thor comics more specifically, there is an antagonist, a villain, known as Gore the God Butcher. And this guy was so badass, he's literally probably one of my top two favorite Thor villains of all time. And his story is just so badass. His just like his lore, like his fight between Thor and like it's really good. I highly recommend you guys check out Gore the God Butcher in the Marvel Universe, at least in the comics, because who knows? He might be the antagonist for Thor, Love, and Thunder. But fingers crossed. But anyway, he was a huge inspiration for me to create this character. So without further ado, let's dive into part 1 to his backstory. Gore was born a slave. For his entire life, he was used as a beatstick and a training dummy for his master's son, Icaros. Icaros's goal was always to become a gladiator, and therefore day in and day out, Gore was beaten, usually half to death. But every night, his master's daughter would tend to his wounds. Eventually, this blossomed into love. One fateful night, the two lovers decided to escape the palace, only to find out that beyond the marble walls was a massive desert. Despair enveloped them, followed by fear, for how can they raise their soon-to-be-born child in these confines? It was already a miracle that their pregnancy was kept hidden, and therefore, for the next few weeks, Gore began planning for their escape, each day hiding away any equipment and food needed for their journey. Unfortunately for Gore, that night his master's son returned from a gladiatorial match in utter anger. To his surprise, his father had been paying off his opponents and rigging his matches. In a fit of rage, he took out his frustrations on Gore, beating him to a bloody pulp. He then proceeded to cut off Gore's nose and ears before leaving him for dead, in a puddle of his own blood. As Gore was lying there, slipping in and out of his consciousness, he saw visions of a lush garden, filled with an endless buffet of lavish foods and wine. Mingling amongst one another were beings that looked very similar to humans, but they exuded an aura of perfection. Just what exactly were these creatures? They lived in excess and without a care in the world. Why couldn't I be born with them, he thought to himself. And that's when, one by one, they stopped eating and conversing, and began to just stare back at him in silence. From the back of the banquet table arose a man clad in white robes. His eyes seemed to peer straight into Gore's soul. He then raised one arm, and a bolt of golden crackling energy manifested. Fear swallowed Gore up as he thought to himself, "This is how he dies." As the bolt then pierced Gore, in a jolt of pain he awoke. He was in a puddle of his sweat, and his body was in total pain. However, he was no longer in the palace. As he looked up, the cool night sky welcomed him. As he tried to move and stand, a warm voice spoke to him. "Stay still, my love. You're safe now." To his surprise, his lover was dragging him upon a small sled across the desert sands. He kept slipping in and out of consciousness until he finally awoke to screams. The stress of pulling Gore and the equipment on top of the desert's heat had forced his lover to give birth much more early. The childbirthing process was bloody and difficult, for she had been on the verge of exhaustion for quite a while now. Gore had to practically pull his son out. That's how weak and frail she had become. With their new child and his love's worsening condition, Gore tried to raise her spirits by telling her of his vision of the gods. He told her that they would help them, that they would welcome them into their lavish gardens. But deep down inside, Gore knew that these gods cared not for them. Human lives were beneath them. Why would they even allow all this suffering, pain, and anguish to enter their gardens? Why did they even feel all these horrible emotions? He could only think of one answer: for their amusement. Gore swallowed his anger and continued on. The next night, his lover died. Her last words were to take care of their son, and that she'll be waiting at the gardens of Olympus for them. A few days later, Gore and his son came within view of a city. Civilization at last, he thought to himself. Finally, he could give his child proper food and care and nourishment now. And with this, he used every ounce of strength he had left to run towards the city of hope. Gore fell to his knees as he arrived at the steps of the city. The streets before him were all riddled with dead bodies. Fountains overflowed with blood. The buildings practically all demolished. Gore couldn't believe his eyes, and he started laughing hysterically. His laughter unfortunately caught the attention of the army laying siege to the city. A soldier, clad in white and gold armor, with a lightning bolt symbol on his chestplate, approached him. "Ah, Gore, we had so much fun. I really did enjoy every second of your agony, slave." He looked up, and he saw the soldier's face morph into that of his master's son, Icaros. "Now, for one last look of anguish upon that disfigured face of yours." With a smile, Icaros drew his blade and pointed it at Gore's son. "Well, would you look at this? Looks like the deed has already been done, and for quite some hours. You've been clutching on to a corpse, you fool." Tears rained down from Gore's lifeless eyes. Icaros grabs Gore by the throat as he picks him up.
"Look at me. I have one parting gift for you."
Icaros's face then begins to morph away once again, this time revealing the same stern yet perfect face he saw in his vision.
"You were right. I did find amusement in your suffering."
And with a flash of lightning, Gore's life comes to an end. There you have it, guys. That was part 1 to this depressing story for Gore the God Hunter. Obviously, there is a part 2 coming out, and even though he has been killed, his story will still continue on. How and what happens, you have to wait for part 2, which I'm hoping would come out either on Saturday or Sunday, so stay subscribed for that part. Again, this is all a mere inkling of the entirety of the Embers of Divinity, so go ahead and check out the video that I will be posting at the end of this video as a link, so check it out. Again, criticism is always welcome, so let me know what you thought about this little short story in the comments down below. This has been The Sound Alchemist, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.